My name is Eric Van Horn. I bought my first franchise in my 20s, and since then, I've owned 6 brands with 25 stores in 8 states. I've also helped 1,000 people find the right franchise for them. People like us who are not cut out for the 9 to 5 and like to work smarter, not harder. How do we find the right franchise, buy it, grow it, sell it, and how do we do it in a way to own the business without it owning us? Those are the questions, and I'm on a mission to give you the answers. Welcome to Franchise Secrets. All right, we are live on Facebook. Kevin, it takes a few minutes for people to join, but everyone, I am joined with Kevin Hulbert today. He's a friend of a friend who will remain nameless because he doesn't like social media. Kevin is a former CIA guy, and we'll just kind of leave it at that. He's done a lot in the CIA. There's some things that I can and can't talk about, so we discussed a little bit of that. And then he has a company that he advises large companies, wealthy individuals, and he's involved in the government at different levels as an advisor. And I wanted to bring him in here because I don't really get my information from the news. I don't get my information from Facebook or a lot of the social media stuff. So I want to bring him in here to kind of see what someone like him, who knows a lot of what's going on in the world, is advising people, and also just to have some fun with him and understand the things, how to, in a crazy world, crazy environments, how do you make good decisions? And Kevin, I'm sure we'll go all over the place, but first and foremost, thank you for serving our country like you have. Thanks for coming on the show.
You're welcome. It's great to be here with you.
So can you give the audience, again, it's mostly franchisees, business owners, a little bit of your background?
I was in the CIA for my career, and at the end, I was in the FBI. I was senior advisor to the FBI for counterterrorism. And I was in the fabled Directorate of Operations at CIA, which are the guys who are overseas running spies and doing covert action and that kind of stuff. So I rose up in that organization. And after I'd had a lot of fun, I punched out about 5 years ago and started XK Group, which is a company that specializes in business intelligence and security. And we help individual clients and big companies navigate the world, what's going on. Our typical kind of clients are big companies, maybe operating in 50 different countries, and they're trying to figure out who are our business partners, what's going on in this country, what sorts of geopolitical risks might we face, everything from physical security of their property to taking care of their people to should they, acquire that big company in Mexico, or are they corrupt, and that sort of stuff. That's what I'm doing now.
I want to know, when did COVID-19 first come onto your radar of this is serious? This is not the normal flu. For me, I'm sure I'm behind, but it was when they canceled the NBA. That's when the aha light bulb went off. I'm like, wow, I probably shouldn't be in this bar drinking Coronas with my friend right now. I should probably be, planning for my businesses. And I think I was ahead of a lot of business owners, but I would imagine you might have been ahead of the NBA. And what was your timeline, and what did you see?
Yeah, that's a good question. The one thing I forgot to mention is that I'm on the President's Intelligence Advisory Board. So I still maintain top secret TSC, SCI clearances and have for decades. And so I am in the know on stuff. The intelligence community started tracking this in late 2019. And we were aware of an outbreak, flu-like, pneumonia-like symptoms coming out of Wuhan, China in late 2019. I forget if it was November or beginning of December. This stuff happens. It's not infrequent. We always have flu season in the world, and it's not infrequent to have flu season with a little bit of tweak on it, something like SARS or MERS or H1N1 or otherwise. And so we started trying it. We started seeing these early indications that this was serious. I think China did us no favors by initially underreporting this and downplaying it and not going public. The best way to fight these pandemics is to get out in front of it and advise people what's going on and take countermeasures. If you can't take countermeasures because no one knows what's going on, then all of a sudden you're in the thick of it. So that's kind of what happened in this situation, not only to us in the States, but to the whole world, from, Italy and Europe to the U.S. and a lot of places. In almost every country, I think, has some incidents of COVID-19 now.
So I think, I'm just a guy here in South Dakota with some businesses, and I don't really, if the decisions are being made in Washington on what to do or at the local government level, the decision can be made regardless of whether I agree with them, like them, don't like them. It's going to happen. And I just need to focus on the things that I can focus on in my business. I'm imagine like the White House and everything going on in Washington. They know things that we don't know, and they're making decisions based on information that we don't know. And so how do you look at it? If you were just someone like me that didn't have access to all the intelligence, how would you advise me or advise the people that you're advising on how to respond, what to pay attention to, what not to pay attention to?
That's a great question. The one thing I'll tell you about this is that there's a lot of mysteries out there about this, but there are not really any secrets. And what I mean by that is, in the intelligence community and whatnot, you always try and collect secrets. You try and get into somebody's computer, recruit sources, get in the office of the presidency, and collect secrets that help to educate policymakers on what's going on. Mysteries are something different. And with a mystery, we don't know what's going to happen. And everything around COVID-19 is a mystery. I can tell you, I've been in, senior high-level briefings in the White House and otherwise, and there are no secrets on this. There's no secret plan. There's no secret study. There's no secret information that we're going to keep people on lockdown until this date, and then we're going to reopen the economy. It's all flushed out there pretty quickly into the public domain. The president and others are having news conference almost every day talking about what's going on. So that's one of the things I try and tell my clients about is they always want the secret information. On this one, there really is no secret information. As far as good sources to follow, and this is important because everyone from my sisters to my wife to my children, they come to me and everyone's gossiping on social media and everywhere else, and they say, "Hey, is it true that?" And then fill in the blank, and it's usually some kind of crazy idea. All day within my own family, I'm patiently explaining that no, that's not really true. You can find out anything on the internet. I mean, you can find out, corroboration for any crazy idea on the internet. So I would encourage people, in order to stay sane, don't try and read the entire internet on this because it's all over the place. There's a lot of stuff out there. But, go on the CDC website. They've got a great section on COVID-19. The WHO website, if you want a more international forum. Listen to the news conferences. Listen to what Anthony Fauci is saying, what other experts are saying. Listen to those guys. You'll have a good understanding of what to do and what countermeasures to take. The other thing I find is everyone is desperate for answers, and everyone's thinking that for a country that put men on the moon 50 years ago, there's got to be some more sophisticated guidance other than wash your hands frequently. And that's what frustrates everybody. But the truth is, social distance, wash your hands, don't touch your face, all those are the kind of fundamental things we need to live by. And these are unprecedented times. I mean, it's the first time in my life anything like this has happened. And it's the first time we've ever quarantined a healthy population. We've never done that before in history. There's a lot of mystery surrounding this and a lot of stuff we don't know. So
I remember being in a meeting, I think there's about 1,000 people there, and they had George H.W. Bush was in a Q&A session. And it was the first time that I'd been around a former president like that in a, fairly small setting, and asking, everyone had to put their phones down and you couldn't record anything. And he talked about 9/11 and what he went through with that. And just me being in that room, I felt the weight of the presidency. They talk about that, and I'm like, wow, what the president, Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter. What that person has to carry and the decisions that they make, it's incredible. What have you seen as being behind the scenes with different things? Like, what were some of the more weighty decisions that had to be made? And I want to relate that into how we as business owners are able to make decisions during this time?
Yeah, I mean, to be sure, being president of the United States is a difficult job. And every morning and every day you're presented with this big list of challenges. It's kind of neat that every day for about the last 70 years, except for Sundays normally, the CIA is in with the President of the United States every morning delivering what we call the Presidential Daily Brief. And, you bring out a thin book and you say, Mr. President, this is what's going on around the world. And what I learned in, a lot of years in government, up to and including today in the President's Intelligence Advisory Board, is that there's a lot of challenges we face as a country where there are no easy answers. I often thought that, in these high level meetings, there'd be one really smart guy in the room. And all of a sudden everyone would say, oh, of course, that's the answer. That's what we ought to do. But what I found out over the years is there's always a lot of smart guys in the room, but we deal with these really challenging, difficult problems. And I don't care if it's North Korea or Iraq or Syria or the topic of the day, what do we do about this pandemic? But the president's got a whole set of difficult challenges before him every day. Doesn't matter what party's in power. These are tough questions, and all that stuff comes up. I mean, in my career, certainly, over the last 15 years or so, talking about terrorism, those have been huge issues. When 9/11 happened and we were trying to figure out, our response to that, what do we do? How do we make sure we're not attacked again? The things that keep me up at night are the threat. Pandemic's certainly one of them now, but the threat of radical Muslim extremism and terrorism. In the United States, we've got this great country, but there are a lot of what we call soft targets. Everything from our food supply to freshwater reservoirs to public schools to everything. It would be nothing to attack those soft targets. So we always worry about that and a million other things, frankly.
We as business owners, our businesses are shut down, and I am in the mode of I'm going to double down, buy more businesses during this time because the deals are better. Everything's going to be on sale because you've got some people exiting because they're scared, because they've lost money, and everybody's losing money right now. The stock market is, everybody's losing money, and there's going to be some people that want to bail. My biggest thing right now is how do I make decisions for the next 12 to 18 months? What's going to happen with social distancing? Is it like, when are things going to open up? There's reports on the news of this might, there might be social distancing for the next 18 months. And then I'm sure, the president wants to get things opened up sooner than later and has to balance it with everything. What kind of advice are you giving people right now that are looking at what the economy, the social distancing is going to be doing in the next 6, 12, 18 months?
Yeah, and it's hit some sectors of the economy certainly harder than others. Some sectors of the economy are actually doing quite well. That's one of those mysteries. Nobody knows how this is going to clear out. The president and his advisors, some of his top advisors, there's a lot of businessmen in that group, in the cabinet. And they're very cognizant of the fact that we've got to get the economy back up and running again. If the economy is destroyed, we've got big problems. It's fascinating, the disparity of wealth in this country. When you've got a situation where the majority of people in this country don't have $1,000 saved for an emergency, it makes things very difficult. That's why we scrambled to pass the stimulus bill and get money into people's pockets. But these are very difficult times. Now, 18 months would be a real outlier on social distancing. I can't imagine we'll go that far. Are we going to be open for business again 100% by May 1st? Probably not. Between those two outliers, I think we've got some space where I think the economy will start to come back online piece by piece. There's a lot of stuff under discussion. How you would do that. We're advancing in a lot of ways. A lot of people are working from home. We're doing a lot of good things. I've been very busy. I've been on calls the last few days from, since 8:00 in the morning until late. And so I'm still maintaining, some productivity and being able to do stuff. If you're running a brick and mortar outfit and you're not open for business, that makes things a lot harder. Yeah, the bottom line is everyone's going to have to see how this plays out. And I don't know when things are going to be open for business as usual.
It kind of goes back to your point earlier, like the information, there are no secrets out there, but there's a lot of unknown. And it's the unknown that is causing people like me to prevent us from making decisions or quick decisions within that. So you mentioned a lot of the president's top advisors are business people. Me and friend Dan Castellini, some others noticed when he came out and he started talking about a lot of this stuff, and he put together some, people that had some influence in the business world around him as he was announcing different things and whatnot. What do you see, again, politics aside, like, as a president picking advisors and the weight that how do they pick their advisors? And because we all should have advisors in our life, and that's where I'm going with this. We should all have advisors. And at the top of the leader of the free world, how does he pick his top advisors, and how does he listen to them? Like, what weight does he give them in ultimately making decisions?
Yeah, good question. I mean, this president is unlike any other president in that he didn't come up through the political system and he didn't come up through a political party where there's a whole kind of cast of guys you would pick from to become your various, cabinet secretaries and whatnot. So this president broke a lot of new ground and he brought a lot of interesting new people into politics at the highest level. Your question, though, gets to an issue that's really important is that all businesses need to have some advisors. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten into situations, particularly with high net worth people, where they make decisions that later come back to haunt them because they don't have around them this infrastructure of trusted advisors. Even if you're a billionaire, lots of times you lack the senior advisory board or the board of directors to help you out. If you're a billionaire, you've got a lot of assets and a lot of interests, ownerships, and that kind of stuff. And I see these guys, they'll kind of stumble into decisions that later they come to regret because they just didn't know what to do and they didn't have good advisors on board. And so we play that role for a lot of individuals as well, where they'll come to us and say, hey, my friend Betty said we ought to invest in this company, and what do you think? And we'll do due diligence on the company and make sure they're legitimate, make sure they're not sanctioned, make sure they're not being sued, make sure they don't have troubles with the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, that kind of stuff. These family offices and these high net worth people, and even if you're not high net worth, you've got some assets, if you've got a franchise, whatever, you've got to have a board of advisors around you, either informally or formally. And I suggest you probably ought to do it formally, that you can go to and say, listen, we were thinking about doing this with the company. What do you guys think? We were thinking about acquiring this company. Do you think that'd be all right? Because it's important to get good advice. Guys who have, what I learned in the intelligence field is that having the right intelligence, having the right information is vitally important to keep the United States of America, safe for the national security of the country, that kind of stuff. When I moved to the private sector, I found that it was just the same, only a little bit different. But the best companies have a good intelligence network, have the best information, which allows them to make the best decisions. And the companies that make the best decisions make the most money. That business intelligence is important too.
Give us a story, like one of the stories where you found yourself in a situation or people in a situation that like you had to make decisions quickly and had to make them with the best information that you had possible and you didn't know the outcome of it. Do you have a story like that you can share?
From my career, it was interesting because I spent some time in war zones, like Afghanistan and Iraq and Pakistan. And it's an interesting dynamic because you never have perfect information. There are a lot of similarities between stuff like that and what's happening in the business world. You never have perfect information. If you did, it'd be quite easy and everybody would be doing the same thing and no one would excel and probably make more money than anybody else. So you're always working with information that's never quite perfect. You always know that 3 weeks from now, you're going to have even better information and probably be able to make a better decision. And so there's the tendency sometimes to not make decisions and not move forward, and you tend to get paralyzed. And I see that in private sector and business all the time. I see businesses where they really should be taking control and making strong decisions. They're reluctant to do so, and people get all jammed up. It's the same thing whether you're fighting Al Qaeda and the Taliban in Afghanistan or whether you're running a business in South Dakota. You've got to make the best decision you can with limited information you can. There's that old line about don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And it's a great line because you've got to make decisions with less than perfect information and move forward.
I've made bad business decisions before. I've made a lot more good ones than the bad ones, but I've made some bad business decisions and lost money. How do you advise? I'm sure you've probably have not made all great decisions, especially with the types of quick decision making that you've had to do. But what would you advise someone that has made a bad business decision, or maybe it's right now? They're like, they got into business just before COVID, and now they're bleeding money, and they see that as a bad business decision. What advice do you have for someone like that?
Yeah, and timing's important in that stuff too. I know somebody who just started a business where their major client was the airline industry, and they were going to be huge, and they started this business 2 months ago, and it was the absolute worst timing in the world, and so nothing happened with that business. But you just got to move forward. I mean, nobody always makes the right call. Even guys who are really successful like Warren Buffett or Bill Gates or other guys, they'll tell you about missteps and how they made bad decisions. But the big thing is just keep moving forward.
Yeah. Let's talk about contingency planning, because you wrote an article or an email and you said, have a plan. An idiot with a plan usually outperforms a genius with no plan. And there's nothing like a good pandemic to make us all take stock of where we are and how we might best protect our families. Can you expand on that a little bit? Because I hope to be an idiot with some type of plan.
Exactly. I think I might have actually heard that originally from famous investor oil man T. Boone Pickens, who said his father told him that. But it's so true. I see that over and over again. If you've got a plan, it's a huge first step. Guys who don't have a plan, all of a sudden something happens and they're out there foundering. Yeah, we wrote this piece about contingency planning and stuff because a lot of the clients were reaching out to us and they had caught themselves kind of, flat-footed and unawares. And so you've got to have a plan for stuff. I was consulting with a company a couple of years ago. Remember when we had those devastating hurricanes go through the Caribbean and St. Martin's and some of the other Caribbean islands? And these guys called me at about 10 o'clock at night. And the next day, a Category 5 hurricane was blowing into this place and it was going to devastate their business. So they had started planning. And it was literally 10 o'clock at night and the Category 5 hurricane was going to hit, by noon the next day. You need to think ahead about this stuff because if you're in the Caribbean, I would think one of the biggest things you would think about is what you do in the case of a hurricane going through, because hurricanes go through the Caribbean pretty much every hurricane season in the fall. You can go overboard on it. And so I tell my clients, don't do that. I had one big Fortune 500 client that wanted us to develop for them contingency plans for everything. And I mean everything from thermonuclear war to active shooter situations, to chemical biological attack, to pandemics, to insider threat. I mean, it went on and on because they wanted to have, 50 3-ring binders on the shelf. So if anything happened, they could say, oh, thermonuclear war. And they'd pull off the 3-ring binder and they'd be ready to go. That's a little bit overboard and you'll spend all your time planning. The other thing I make note of is that the best battle plan never survives first contact with the enemy. And that's often true. You're probably never going to have the perfect plan. But you have to be thinking about it because if you haven't thought about it and you haven't reasoned through certain things, then you're going to freeze when it comes to be action time. And this is particularly important for families too, not just big Fortune 500 companies. But for families, it's really important that you sit down at some point and say, okay, what do we do? What's going to happen if the cell phone grid goes down? What do we do if we lose power? Whose house do we rally at? Do we have enough food to get by for 3 days or a week or a month?
I mean, is this something that everybody should be thinking about right now, Kevin? Like you're listing off stuff, but should people like normal everyday Joes be having a plan like this in place for the families?
Oh, yeah, I think absolutely. And, I don't want to be alarmist and, you don't want to spook everybody in your family so nobody can sleep at night. But I frankly sleep a lot easier knowing that I know if it all goes to hell and the electric grid goes down, I've got candles, I've got flashlights, I've got contingency plans. I know if, our system breaks down and we can't get food to markets, whatever, I've got enough food in the house to last me months. And I'm not a big prepper with, underground bunkers and all sorts of stuff, but
You have friends. You just have friends that have that stuff. Like you have a friend with a
exactly.
boat, friends with a plane, friends with a
But
bunker.
but I know I sleep pretty easy because if I've got to close my door one day and not go out for 3 months, I'd be fine. I mean, we'd have stuff to eat and stuff to drink, and we'd be just fine.
And
So
I think the thing is not that big of a deal to have to that's worst case scenario, and that will probably never happen, but it's not that big of a deal. It's an easy fix, an easy plan to put into place on something like that. So there are extreme situations, but if it's not that painful, it'd be painful to build a bunker. But if it's not that
yeah,
painful to put some plans in place, then why not do it, right?
exactly. Rather than spooking everybody and making them feel uneasy, I personally feel a lot better knowing that I've got food in the pantry and a way to purify water and a first aid kit. And, if you're on prescription drugs, you ought to have, a 2 or 3 month supply on hand. And all that kind of stuff, I think, just allows you to sleep a lot easier at night. No plan's perfect, and you're never going to get it 100% right, but have a plan, stay informed, talk to your family, and then if you're running a business, you've got some obligation as a businessman to protect your employees, make sure they're okay.
Hmm.
We talk about having a go bag, being able to bug out if you need to, and that gets back to you need to think through a lot of this stuff too. I mean, there's some situations where you really should just pack up and leave. Maybe it's some, chemical biological attack, or, a nuclear bomb goes off, something like that. You're going to want to get up and leave and get out of danger. If you're in California, maybe it's wildfires that are, blowing through the neighborhood, burning down all the homes. It can be a whole lot of stuff. But then there are other situations where the best course of action, in fact, the majority of the situations where the best course of action is really just to hunker down. I mean, we're in one of those today where we're in a house. It could be a hell of a lot worse. Everybody's in their house. Most people have nice houses, hot showers every morning. As long as you have food in the cupboards, you're fine. Even if you don't have food in the cupboards, all the grocery stores are open. There's no
Yep.
shortages. It's all good. But it's good to plan ahead and have a plan and have a first aid kit and food and ways to purify water, all that stuff.
You talked earlier about like certain sectors are really strong and certain sectors are getting hammered right now. I think people know what sectors are getting hammered and are thinking what sectors are strong now and will they be strong coming out of this? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're selling Purell hand sanitizers, business is booming. Amazon.
I have a friend watching right now. My friend Josh is doing that exact same thing. So funny you say that.
Yeah, I mean, online stuff's doing well. Entertainment, Netflix is booming. There's a lot of stuff that's booming. If you're a brick and mortar running an ordinary business, it's amazing. I don't care if you're a hair salon or a restaurant or whatever. I mean, it's really tough times. We had a friend who is big into sports. You mentioned the NBA early on. My friend's big into sports, and he started this company where they give the line on sports and talk, and he had a bunch of subscribers, and we thought that was the neatest way in the world to make money, just sitting around watching football games and NBA and stuff. All of a sudden his business went to zero. I had never expected that, but gosh, everything's been canceled. So I think the last sporting event I saw on TV was, some guys playing darts or something. You know, it's tough. Oil industry is getting hammered, and the oil industry is getting hammered not only because there's a huge glut of oil on the market, but also because demand is down like
Hmm.
30 or 40%. So it was interesting that yesterday, even when they struck the agreement to limit production, and Saudi Arabia and Russia, backed down and stepped back, the price of oil still went down because everyone realized that that there was such glut of oil on the market. So it's going to be difficult to pick the winners and losers. There's a lot of timing involved too.
I think what's interesting in conversations like this, and as franchisees and business owners and future franchisees are listening to this, I like having conversations like this with people that are much smarter than me in their areas of expertise. Because you start, even though it may not, with oil, I think that really doesn't apply to my business now. We talked about the supply chain, but as I learn about what other businesses are doing and how far ahead they have to think, it makes me realize how short-term focused I am in my own businesses. So that's one of the things that I appreciate having these types of conversations, because it just makes me think bigger and make sure that I get accurate information. We're, just now, I think the curve's flattening, or just there's talk of that. Like we're at that point right now. A couple of weeks ago, it was more unknown with that. Now we are going to probably go into a time of uncertainty in how the economy is going to respond, how the stimulus packages are really going to help people. I'm sure bankruptcies are corporate and personal are going to be on the increase. And I would imagine, if I was a betting guy, that we're headed into a recession. What would you say to all of that?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I think we're going to head into a recession. Technically, we might be there already. Then the big question is that recession going to be, as we hope, V-shaped, and that you go into it really quick and come out of it really quick? Or is it going to go down and then we just kind of go off for a while and it's flat and this endures for years? If we knew the answer to all that stuff, then we'd be trading stocks and barely make a whole lot of money, wouldn't have to work for a living. My gut feel is that we're going to fall into this really quickly, and I think we're going to get out of it really quickly as well. This economy has been booming. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're right of center or left of center or what your political bent is. This administration, these guys have done a very good job, and the economy is booming. I mean, right before a couple months ago, when we fell into this COVID-19 pandemic, we were enjoying the longest peacetime expansion in my lifetime, and I'm in my 50s, lowest interest rates in my lifetime, lowest unemployment rate in my lifetime. So there's a lot of stuff to cheer about. There's a lot of money out there. You get access to capital. You could get the cheapest loans, like I said, that have existed in my lifetime. And, so I think we've got a good foundation for the economy that will allow us to recover quickly, because things were actually in very good shape before 2 months ago. So I think it'll come back quickly.
What about real estate? In the prior in the prior recession, I don't think we had the Airbnbs and all the short-term vacation rental type stuff. So how do you see the real estate market, both retail and commercial and residential, changing based on the new way that people are making money in real estate?
Yeah, that's funny you asked that, because I actually used to work in real estate a long time ago. I worked for Lincoln Property Company, which is one of the bigger diversified real estate development firms in the country. And I also
Is that like a cover for like CIA doing stuff elsewhere?
A long time ago when I got out of grad school. This you mentioned Airbnb and VRBO and that stuff too. That has been a huge, and I actually own some places that we rent out. That's been a huge paradigm shift. I mean, like you said at the beginning too, I think the guys who are contrarian, who are looking at, what's a good buy, maybe go and do stuff, do quite well. I bought a house on the beach 20 years ago, right after a major hurricane. And the area had been devastated. There were literally houses in the middle of the ocean. And everybody told me, you're crazy. This is nuts. Nobody's buying beachfront property. You're going to get killed. And, I've done quite well. That house is worth about 4 times more than what I paid for it, 20 years ago, when it was, basically a fire sale. People who are smart about that and do that, I think, are going to do quite well. The other big paradigm shift is the double impact of VRBO and Airbnb platforms allowing people to buy second homes that they can make income off quite easily and rent out short term, coupled with the lowest interest rates in our lifetimes, has made the ownership of second homes or investment properties, I guess is a better term, a lot more viable for a huge swath of America. And so a lot of people are going out and doing it and saying, this is a good idea. I can buy an investment property that I'll use as a second home when we want a vacation in the area, and I can make good income on it. And interest rates are, crazy low. I'm very bullish on real estate.
Yeah. I want to see how you went from the CIA and then going into the private sector, because you've built a really strong company with, with some really smart people around you that do different things. And how much of a risk was that for you to do? And did you have any fear doing that, knowing, did you have a book of business that was ready to go, or was that a risk for you to start up?
Well, I mean, there's some risk. It's tough leaving the warm cocoon of having worked for the government for a long time, because every month, every 2 weeks you're getting a check. You know that you're going to make a little more next year than you made last year. I mean, it's pretty solid, and so there's a lot of advantage working for the government in addition to serving your country and doing all those noble things. So launching out in the private sector is always a little bit of uncertainty going into the unknown. I had this different background in that, I went to school, majored in business, went to grad school, got my master's in business, and actually worked as a businessman for a while before I went into government. So I understood it and I knew it, which gave me a significant competitive advantage. I know other guys who have worked in government for 30 some years or something, they get out and they've literally never worked in business world. I mean, the last job they had maybe was flipping hamburgers at McDonald's when they were 16 years old. I mean, literally. And then they went to West Point when they were 18 and this and that. So I had a big advantage in that I had worked in corporate America. And more importantly, I think I had a bunch of friends who were businessmen, and that gives you a bunch of contacts. I mean, I know some guys who got out of government that if you handed them a 3x5 card and said, write down on this card the name of every businessman they wouldn't get very far, because their whole life was, working in the agency or working in, the military and being in spec ops and that kind of stuff. That makes it much more of a challenge when you don't know anybody in the business world and you don't know anything about business and you've got no training. Then it's a lot more of a challenge. I was very lucky in that I had a lot of good contacts. And what I noticed happening was I had a lot of people engaging me informally and saying, hey, Kevin, Mexico well, you used to live there, you speak the language fluently. We're thinking about doing a business down there with a company called Gutierrez y Asociados. And what do you know of them? And I found that with my network and my background and my contacts, it was pretty easy for me to figure out what was going on with this company or that company. So I just started informally helping some friends out who are in the business world, doing due diligence so they could know and understand their clients and their risks. When I did decide to get out of government service, it was a much easier transition for me and allowed me to go out and build the company.
That's one of the things that I talk about this a lot, but 3 years ago, I started joining masterminds and just putting myself in different rooms with really smart people. And my network of people where I can just pick up the phone or send a text to reach just about anybody that has proven to be invaluable. And so, that makes things so much easier, doesn't it? It's not about what you know, it's about who you know. And we all know that, but until you know people who know people, you don't really understand how valuable that is.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we often say that the know who is often more important than the know how. And so having a network of people who can support you, that you can bounce ideas off of. None of us know everything about everything. So it's great to have a network that you can go to and say, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Geographic areas. If I was doing something in Paris, I'd call a couple of friends of mine who are native French speakers who live in Paris, and I'd ask them what they thought. Same with a lot of parts of the world. So having that network is always important.
Well, I know we are running up against on the hour. One last question. As you are advising private equity, family offices, are they changing the way that they're investing right now? Are they in a holding pattern, or are they in a getting ready to get bullish and buy things on sale? What's kind of the general mindset out there, or does it just depend on their appetite?
Yeah, it's all over the place. It does depend on their appetite a little bit, but it depends where you're standing because some people pulled money out of the market before it
Mhm.
really started to go down. Those people are kind of on the sidelines trying to figure out the timing on when we get back in. Other people got schwacked by this and now they're thinking now's not the time to pull money out of the market. Might as well
Mhm.
stay in and this will come back. I mean, to be sure, this will come back. I don't know if we'll be back up to records on the Dow in 6 months or if it'll be 6 years. I mean, sometimes these holes take a long time to climb out of. And then, like I said, certain industries and certain companies, of course, are going to do well. So everybody's appetite's different. So it's all over the board,
Well, that
frankly.
makes a lot of sense because it's about the decisions that you made 6 months, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months ago on the position that you're in today. And I have friends in different positions. Some are sitting on a lot of cash right now, and
Yeah.
some are sitting with a lot of businesses that are closed and were in that expansion mode and they got caught in it. Any mindset differences between the two that you've seen? Were the people a little scared to that pulled out cash? Because I pulled
Well,
out a lot more
it's
cash.
interesting. I mean, I certainly don't have a lot of money. I was a government servant my entire career, but I was out of the market almost completely. Now, I'd like to say it's because I'm a genius and I anticipated this pandemic, but the truth is, 3 months ago, no one in the world thought that a pandemic might sweep the country and shut down everything and that kind of stuff. But I was out of the market almost entirely 3 months ago because frankly, we were in the longest bull market in our lifetimes, and markets are always cyclical and they go up and down. And so we had a really good long run. And I just got thinking that, if you do the math, I'm thinking the likelihood that the stock market's lower in a year is probably higher than the likelihood the market's higher than a year. And also it has to do with your age too. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
I'm, in my 50s, and so I need to think about preservation of capital and that kind of stuff. If I was in my 30s, I probably would have said, screw it. I'm not going to use these retirement funds for another 40 years. Who cares? But so it depends on so
Yeah.
much stuff. Your tolerance for risk, where you are in your life cycle. If you need the money or not, you need to have access to it or not. All sorts of stuff. I mean, clearly there will be opportunities now, and if this does come out and all of a sudden, everything's great, and 6 months ago this is distant memory, we're all going to be kicking ourselves for why we didn't take advantage and buy stocks when the market was low, buy real estate when no one was buying real estate, et cetera. But it's awful hard to get that timing right.
You said something just a little bit ago about, do I think the stock market's going to be lower or higher in a year from now? And that's a very simple statement, a simple way to look at things and a simple way to make decisions. Do you take complex situations and simplify them pretty on a normal basis?
Yeah, I mean, you have to, otherwise you just get so overwhelmed. So, you've got to kind of step back and say, okay, what does this mean? What do I think? When we go into situations in war zones and others, when I'd go into command situations, you go in and you say, okay, what's going on? What's the status? What do I need to do? What do I need to do right now? Because it's important to, protect people and prevent loss of life, that kind of stuff. What do I need to do that I can maybe do later in the next month or 2 months or 3 months, or maybe my 12-month plan, that kind of stuff. So that gets back to one of the first things we talk about is planning. I mean, it's always important to have a plan and have an idea where you're going, what you're doing. And if you don't have an idea, then you're just taking it as it comes along. And, who knows? So you need to think about these things. Where do I want to be? Should I invest in the stock market now? Should I stay on the sidelines? If I do get back in, when should I get back in? What might be some of the triggers that would cause me to think we're coming out of this and I should jump back in the market? And maybe those triggers would be, when the curve was flattening, when the number of deaths, in the country tended to be declining, when the number of new infections were declining, when a vaccine was announced, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of things. But if you articulate those things, I mean, I'm a big list keeper and I write stuff down on pieces of paper and I say, these are some of the things that would be a trigger for me to know. And I do this with companies too. We have companies that are operating in dangerous areas. because I do a lot of work for companies that are working in the oil patch. Most places that are oil, with the exception of Norway and the United States, seem to be lousy places. Whether you're in, Africa or, parts of Latin America or other places. A lot of these places are lousy places. And so I've got companies that are operating in harm's way in lousy places in Africa where the situation's deteriorating. And so you need to really step back and say, okay, it's not a good situation. I need to make sure I monitor to this so that I know when it's time to pull these people out so no one gets killed. So I need to think about what would be some of the indicators to me that this situation is going from bad to worse and I should evacuate everybody. Okay, I'll track, the number of terrorist attacks. I'll track, deaths by terrorism. I'll track, if this armed militia group is moving into this area, et cetera. So there's a lot of stuff you need to track and kind of be aware of. And if you don't think about it, and if you don't plan, then you're just kind of you're along for the ride.
That's great advice, because I think, it's when you are planning this stuff, you have a clear mind. It's not an emotional decision. When you plan something, you put a trigger in there, whatever that trigger is. We should all have triggers in our businesses and our personal lives. Like, if this happens, I should do this. And
exactly.
We should all have it now. How long do if we're not open for 2 years, probably shouldn't be paying your rent still. There's certain things that you should have planned out beforehand. I'm looking at buying different large businesses right now, and we're looking at best, worst, and likely scenarios. But, as we're going through the due diligence phase, if we start to get off track of what we think we're going to do in this, then it's time to pull the plug on that business, even if we spent money on it, going through the due diligence phase. So I'm a big believer in having these triggers that are well thought out during the good times, or during a time where you can think clearly and non-emotionally. So that's great advice. Well, I could go on and on. So I'm going to end it here so you can go, but I could talk for hours with you. My friend was right about this conversation, and my nameless friend. But I appreciate you coming on, Kevin, and thanks for bringing value to this audience. Michael's going to turn us off from Facebook, and then stay on just for a minute, if you would, please.
You got it, Eric. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Secrets Podcast. Whether you're watching or listening, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to whatever channel you're listening on. If you want my help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business, please visit franchisesecrets.com.